Welcome, LA Progressive friends, family, readers, viewers. This is Dick and Sharon coming to you again this morning, and we are delighted again, once again, to be joined by Bill Blum. Bill Blum is a frequent contributor to the LA Progressive, as well as many other publications, including The Progressive and Truth Dig, and he's a former judge and death penalty defense attorney. He's the author of 3 legal thrillers and a contributing writer for the California Lawyer magazine. Welcome, Bill Blum.
Always good to be with you.
So this morning, we're going to talk to you about a piece that we're carrying in the LA Progressive this morning, and the name of the piece is The Hypocrisy of Originalism. So who by chance are you saying is being hypocritical? Who could that be?
Okay. Well, we know originalism is the catechism of the conservative Supreme Court. They've been pushing originalism for decades now, and since they've triumphed with a 6-justice supermajority, originalism is now the way that the court approaches constitutional questions. Originalism, in a nutshell, says that the terms and provisions of the Constitution are to be understood today as they were understood at the time that they were adopted. So when it comes to the Colorado case, Trump v. Anderson, dealing with the former president's eligibility to appear on the presidential ballot, what is at issue is the interpretation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, which, to summarize, says that insurrectionists shall not hold public office if they've previously taken an oath to support the Constitution. And the Colorado Supreme Court issued a very lengthy and very detailed and very originalist analysis of that section and held that Trump was not eligible to appear on that state's primary presidential ballot, and by extension on the presidential ballot at all, assuming that he wins the Colorado primary, which he probably will. So Trump, it was after a 5-day district court trial. So Trump appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States, asked for expedited processing. He got that. And at the recent oral argument, it was clear to everyone that the Supreme Court is going to reverse Colorado's ruling and allow him to appear on the ballot. And in so doing, the court is not going to employ originalism, but is going to use a consequentialist analysis and basically say, if we allow one state to kick Trump off the ballot, the consequences will be chaos. And so we are very, very worried. We don't have the decision yet. We don't know the precise rationales that each of the justices will adopt to concur in that holding, but I feel safe and secure predicting that that will be the holding. And there are certain avenues, certain off-ramps that the court can take to reach that result. One is to hold that that presidents alone are not officers of the United States to whom Section 3 is applicable. 2, they could say Section 3 is not what we call self-executing. What we mean by self-executing is that a provision of the Constitution requires additional legislation from Congress in order to take effect. And number 3, they can say that there's inadequate proof or an inadequate process in Colorado to determine that he's an insurrectionist. If you're true to the text and history of Section 3, all of those arguments should fail. And as the court has told us over and over again, for example, in death penalty cases, we're not here to worry about consequences. We just follow the law. Well, the court is not going to follow the law in this case. It's going to allow Trump to stay on the ballot. And I think you can bet the farm on that.
So it doesn't seem that the public confidence in the Supreme Court could fall much lower, but it seems that it will in this case. What do you think are the consequences of that?
Well, I think the court is widely perceived as partisan, this will reinforce that belief. If the court went the other way, I think there would be a hue and cry from the other side of the aisle, and it would lose public support from that perspective. So the court, from the standpoint of legitimacy, is in a very tough place, largely of its own making by virtue of past decisions such as the Dobbs decision overruling Roe and its very extreme jurisprudence on the Second Amendment, in which the court has just reinterpreted the Second Amendment to mean something very, very different from what the founders of the country intended it to mean. So in terms of legitimacy, this is a court that's in big trouble. I think that the justices believe that the better course for them is to stay out of electoral politics if they can. But there's that other case, Jack Smith's election subversion case, which is also before the court now, in which Donald Trump wants the Supreme Court to overrule the opinion of the DC Circuit Court of Appeals and hold that Trump is absolutely immune from criminal prosecution. And here we have a slightly different situation in terms of the court's disposition. I think on the merits, when and if the court reaches them, the court's going to rule against Trump, because even this Supreme Court, I believe, is not going to hold that a president is absolutely immune from criminal prosecution for acts committed during the term of the presidency. But the question is, when will the Supreme Court issue its ruling? Because everyone knows that the clock's ticking, and the closer we get to November, the less likely it is that the election subversion case is going to go to trial. And if the election happens before the case goes to trial and Trump wins, and it's very possible that he could win, then as he takes office, he can just tell the Justice Department, instruct the Justice Department to drop the prosecution. That's the game plan. And everyone knows it. Jack Smith is pointing this out to the court. I'm not sure that the public yet understands that that's the game plan. So this is a real subterfuge on the part of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is like a cornered rat. And as the cats in the room get closer to him, he becomes more and more desperate and vicious. And that's basically the situation in the Supreme Court. At the same time, we've got a trial date in New York on the hush money case, and that's going to go forward. It now looks fairly certain on March 25th. So he's got to get ready for that too. And then there's the Georgia situation, which now is in flux because of the relationship between Fani Willis and the special prosecutor, Mr. Wade, with whom she had a relationship. And that's being litigated, and that's being live streamed from the court in Georgia for all the world to see. And there, I think it's also pretty clear, as we listen to the evidence come in that case, that Donald Trump's goal is not really to get Willis off the case. That would be a grand slam. I don't think he's going to achieve that. I don't think they've met their burden of showing a conflict of interest that will affect the defendants. But I think that they will and are succeeding in delaying that case. There's no trial date as yet set in that case, so I don't think that one's going to go forward. And then you have the documents case down in Florida, which should be the easiest case of all, which still has a late May trial date, but everyone knows that that's not going to go forward because the judge in that case is slow walking the proceedings because she's very, very favorable, many say biased in favor of the former president. So that's in a nutshell on the criminal side. On the civil side, he's got a lot of problems. He's lost the E. Jean Carroll case. We're waiting for Judge Engoron's decision in the case brought by the New York Attorney General. And Trump has just announced that he's not going to appeal to the US Supreme Court the civil cases brought by the police officers and Representative Swalwell and others for damages resulting from the January 6th attack on the Capitol. So that's going to move forward, but we don't have a trial date there. That's a civil case. Those cases tend to move pretty slowly. And in any event, this is a guy with so many legal problems that his best defense is to delay everything as long as he can and to win election in November so that he can wield the power of the presidency to stop the federal prosecutions and to stay the state prosecutions under supremacy clause and principles of federalism and comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, not comedy, C-O-M-E-D-Y, although we find a lot of comedic relief in a dark sense with Donald Trump all the time.
So I want to ask you a couple of very fundamental questions for people who are listening to this who don't have a law background. So we've just gone over several cases, two of which are in federal court and two of which are in state court. The New York and Georgia cases are in the state court. Let's talk about if Donald Trump were to win office, what kind of authority would he have over the two state pending state, if they're pending, I don't know what the status they'd be in. And tell me about the Eric Swalwell and the others who are suing him for damages in the civil case. Is that federal because it occurred in Washington, D.C.? Or could you?
Yeah, that's a federal case. And so that's going to go forward. The issue there was whether the president's actions were within what they call the outer perimeter of his office under a case called Nixon versus Fitzgerald. And the appellate court said, no, they fall within the ambit of the presidency. They are actually outside the office of the presidency. When you incite an insurrection, that's not consistent with your official duties. So we're going to allow this case to go forward.
Oh, no. So would he, if he were to win the presidency, could he get rid of that case? It's in federal court, but could he do it if it's at the appellate level?
That's a really great question. He might be able to stay it. There's not a lot of law on that question. If you look at the old Clinton versus Jones case, which allowed a lawsuit to proceed against Bill Clinton while he was in office for acts committed before he took office, you would have to decide if there's a distinction because he's still in office at the time of the acts complained of in the Swalwell case. So I don't know how they rule on that. But Clinton versus Jones is interesting because there's dicta in it which would suggest that state criminal prosecutions against a sitting president should be stayed because they would impinge upon the ability of the president to function. And that would have an effect on the New York and Georgia criminal prosecutions. So I've said for a long, long time that Trump is running for office, not just because he has this massive ego, but because he's running for his life. He wants to stay out of jail and he wants to avoid further judgments against him. But there's no way he's going to be able to avoid the civil judgments that are going to come down, and two of which have already come down in New York, and another we're expecting. Those are going to remain on the books, and he's going to have to deal with them. So, and they're going to be problems.
He or his heirs.
Well, you're assuming that he's not going to be around.
He's,
Right.
I mean, he weighs what? He says he weighs
230 pounds.
But come on.
A hefty 230. So in this Trump legal Lollapalooza, I mean, a while ago, I thought, well, this is preposterous. He's not going to win the election. But as days go by, and one advantage of all his legal problems is he's front and center on the first page of the newspaper every single day. So how could we have a legal system if he succeeds. I mean, then the dogs would be set loose. I mean, so I guess I'm the glass half full guy too often. But do you see any way that that Trump will be held to account before the election?
Well, I think that he's going to get a verdict in the New York hush money case. That's going to be that's going to happen, and we should have a verdict, say, by the end of April. I don't think that case is going to take that long. I don't know whether the election subversion case will actually go to trial. It depends on how long the Supreme Court takes deciding the immunity question. So I think that in terms of just technical accountability, there is going to be some. Now, will he be in jail? Will he be prohibited from running? I don't believe he will be, because the Supreme Court is going to overturn the Colorado Supreme Court's decision in the Anderson case. So to answer your question, I think we're looking at a constitutional crisis in the United States if he is reelected. And so that leads you to the election. And the election, unfortunately, is shaping up to be a choice between Biden and Trump. And I think people have to come to terms with that. There are many people on the left who so dislike Joe Biden for one reason or another, or believe he's just too old, that they're drawn to supporting a candidate who's more to their liking in terms of substance, say, like someone like Cornel West, who I like very much. But Cornel West is not going to be president. So you have to think of it along the lines that Noam Chomsky has talked about elections. It doesn't take a long time, unless you live in one of these states where you got to stand in line for many hours to vote. In California, where we three of us live, you can vote by mail. It takes you 5 minutes to fill out your ballot, and you drive it to a ballot drop-off box or a mailbox, and that's it. The rest of the time, you can campaign and organize around issues and criticize Biden all you want for foreign policy, for not being strong enough on the environment, et cetera, and so forth. But it's going to come down to Biden or Trump, democracy or authoritarianism, neo-fascism. And hopefully more and more people are going to wake up to that reality. The Democrats do very well in these special elections. They outperform the polls and the pundits. Hopefully that will continue. And come January 2025, we can fight a second Biden administration on policy rather than defend ourselves against a second Trump administration and all of the horrible things that it wants to do, including invoking the Insurrection Act to quash street demonstrations.
Absolutely. I thought those are wise words.
So I had a question. You saw part of Fannie Willis's testimony, and the legal heads on the talking heads that we watched afterwards said that she was over the top, that she was ineffective. And we were sitting there saying, "You go, girl, give them hell." And I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but do you think she was effective? How do you think that'll play out?
I think overall she was very effective. And again, there's an audience of one.
Right.
And the pundits, it's interesting to listen to them. Many of the ones that I heard said that they thought she actually saved the day, and that Wade's testimony in the morning was very cautious. He's also involved in a divorce proceeding, so he had to be real careful about what he said in this case, because his ex-wife could use that against him in the other case. So Fannie Willis came in with both guns blazing. I didn't see the very beginning of her testimony.
I did.
Because what I understand was that the state was trying to keep her off the stand, and then she just bursts into the courtroom and says,
Yes.
"I'm testifying." I mean, it was like straight out of a David Kelly production.
It was. And as a Black woman, I felt like one of the things that incensed her, many things did, but one was the fact that it was said that she had sex with him when she first met him. Now, I could see what she was so angry about. She had spoken in a church. She's very close to her father. She does not want that, and it's not true. And I believe that when she said that did not happen, but I could see why she was so enraged about that, because Black women forever are dealing with this, the reputation of being highly sexualized. We are highly sexualized by those who choose to do that. And that just really pissed her off. And I was so glad that she set the record straight on that one.
But I must say, I spent most of the morning looking high and low in our house, because Sharon told me it's routine for Black women to keep large sums of money in their house.
You think it's, you know what it is? Don't tell your husband.
Exactly.
But you have a story about that. You back that up.
A story about what? About Black people having money?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
of course. I mean, I think that that's a very standard thing. In the event that your credit cards aren't accepted, in the event that you need to leave quickly, yeah, you have to keep a little bit of safe money kept safe, but I haven't always done it. So I have not been as disciplined as Fannie Willis. And
her father told that touching story about being in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yeah, we've already talked about that.
No, but we're not on film. He was at Cambridge, Massachusetts at Harvard with his wife and his small daughter, his 8-year-old daughter, and a restaurant wouldn't take his credit card, wouldn't take his Amex card, wouldn't take traveler's checks. And fortunately, he had a $10 bill to pay the $9.90 bill. You know, and he knew precisely why that was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Wow. I guess that's why I always pay. Huh? No.
I think she helped her cause. Yeah. And my prediction is that the defense is going to lose its motion. I don't know whether Mr. Wade stays on the case or not, but I don't think that the office or the district attorney, Fannie Willis, will be disqualified.
I hope not. I think that she made her.
I hope not too.
There are many progressives that have argued that perhaps she should leave just because of the distraction that was being created because of this relationship, and that it was a bad idea. But the more that you listen to her story and hear that, you know, she's had to move so many times, the loneliness, I could so see how that could happen, that being the relationship.
And relationships between people who work together are very common across the board.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Here, even at LA Progressive, we have a certain amount.
That's what I hear.
So we can't wait for your next article. I mean, in this Trump legal Lollapalooza, I'm sure very soon there'll be reactions to the next step. This is pretty fascinating stuff. This is actually a little bit like way back in the day, in the Watergate days, where, you know, you look for the newspaper every day because there was a new development. Well, this is kind of the same thing.
That's right. Well, Bill Blum, thank you so much for joining us again and for further enlightening us and keeping us all informed about some of these things that those of us who haven't gone to law school really can't follow. But you're making it a lot easier. So we really appreciate that.
We appreciate it. Yep.
Thanks so much.
Okay, so long. Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.